Greetings, this is Rod Navarre, and for those of you listening to the audio-only portion of our podcast, this is episode 17, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, our video interview with Stephen Cheney. Stephen is the designer tasked with working on combat and crafting for the Pathfinder Online game, and we'll hopefully have some very good information from him. You may want to watch the window in the wall behind him that leads onto one of the halls at Goblinworks, and just see how many people you can recognize passing by the window. But nevertheless, we have Stephen Cheney talking about crafting and combat. First off, Stephen, thank you again for allowing us to have your time. I know it's valuable there at Goblinworks, and we really appreciate the information you're going to give us. How is your title at Goblinworks going? What is that?
We're all just game designers now, except for Lee, who is lead game designer.
You're just GDs, I see.
Yeah, someday when we have many more employees and we all have people underneath us, we might differentiate our titles, but for now.
Yes, with no minions, titles are irrelevant. Yes.
I don't like to refer to them as minions, but yes, without people further down the chain of command.
Gobbocast has begun to put these videos up on YouTube, and we're really hoping to reach a lot more people through YouTube than just those people who are following Pathfinder Online, which is sort of the thrust of what I want to ask some questions with today. I'm going to try, if you don't mind, to ignore those little goblinoid voices nipping at my heels saying, "Numbers! Give us more numbers!" And actually talk about what a player might face when he walks in that first day of EE. I mean,
all right.
We all have some expectations, I think, about what's going to go on there. But for those people who have not been following the threads very much, they're going to come in that first day of EE, and I know they're going to have to do things like combat and crafting, and they're going to be a little bit, I won't say confused, but uninformed. So today I'd sort of like to ask about how can we give information to that player about combat and crafting. For example, let's say the player logs on the first day of EE, and he knows that if he wants to survive to do the things he's got to do, he's going to have to do some sort of combat. And he's not really sure about how he can go about that in a really efficient or proficient way. So could you describe for us what are the basics of combat in PFO, and how would someone start getting proficient in that?
All right, so combat in Pathfinder Online is sort of a limited attack option game. It's sort of in the vein of your Guild Wars' and a lot of your modern games that you have several buttons to push, but you can't put a billion buttons on your toolbar the way you can in World of Warcraft or the like. So you have to make some selections as to what you're actually going to use. You can't just store this stun over in the upper right corner just in case you sometimes need it, as you do in your Star Wars The Old Republics and your World of Warcrafts.
So it means we're going to actually have to think about what we're doing when we want to prepare.
Right. When you go out, you have to choose a loadout of attacks and abilities you're going to use. And this sort of philosophy permeates everything with our characters. Because we are a skill-based system that, theoretically, if you are a subscriber to our game for years and years and years, you will master several different roles. You could be a fighter and a cleric and a wizard and a rogue by the time you're done. But you can't be all those at the same time. And so we have a number of slots that are passive abilities and a number of slots that are active abilities, and that number is finite. And so you could multi-class, essentially, by mixing and matching your abilities from various groups, but you can't have all of them available to you at every given time. And so the attacks are just part of that. You have 6 attacks on your weapon at most, plus a few additional utility abilities and consumables, and up to 6 attacks on your implement, which is sort of like your spellbook for wizards or analogs for other roles.
You have a non-weapon object that you're going to be using to defend or combat. Yeah.
Right. And our goal is to ramp you up slowly, so you're not overwhelmed by oh my god, I have 20 options the moment out of the gate. More realistically, you're going to walk out and go, I can hit it with a club by mashing number 1. All right, now I'm ready. Now I'm moving up. And you'll start adding those more gradually. If you want to dive in feet first, we are no longer following the idea of unlocking those slots slowly. Like, you'll have them all available to you from the very moment, but you'll probably buy abilities slowly at your own speed. We're trying to strike that balance of not overwhelming people and yet allowing them to customize to their heart's content without having to jump through arbitrary hurdles.
Well, let's take a more finite example. Let's say that someone wanted to be battle axe proficient. How would that person go about building that into his character?
All right, so you'll need a battle axe proficiency, which at this point is primarily just a gate for I bought this proficiency, now I can buy battle axe attacks. And the main things it basically does is, look, now I can see all these things on the trainer that I have to consider. But so you'll go to the trainer. The Dreadnought trainer right now is the one that teaches the general attacks that are more based on fighters and barbarians and such. We didn't put them on the individual role trainers because a whole group of roles will eventually want them, even though right now it's primarily just fighters. And you'll go in there and you'll buy axe proficiency, and then a bunch of axe attacks will open up, and you'll buy all those. And you should probably buy an axe at some point. At some point we'll have a market. You may have gotten it as a drop from a creature. I don't know how you got an axe. That's between you and your god. But so you'll slot the axe, and we have a sort of interim solution right now where as soon as you slot a weapon, it grabs as many attacks as you have for it and sort of slots it in a haphazard order that you'll probably want to rearrange to the way you want to use them, but at least you don't have to drag them all onto your bar because we do that a little bit for you. Long term, we'd like to have a slightly more intelligent solution that actually remembers what you saw last time or arranges them in some particular order. But right now, basically, you'll drag the axe, and if you have any axe attacks, suddenly you'll have attacks on your bar that match the axe that you bought.
So you won't have to worry about forgetting something because you're new at this. It'll sort of dump on everything you've got will suddenly appear there when you pick up the axe.
When you pick up the if you have the axe first and you're like, why are there no attacks on my axe? Then you buy attacks. You will have to open up a feats panel and drag them down, or take off your axe and put it back on. We'll get better on the UI handling of that over time. But essentially, you will have an axe, and you will have up to 6 attacks on your axe. And the first 3 are your primary attacks. They are very cheap. They're very fast. They don't do very much. They are mostly for responding to situations or just using over and over again until one of your secondaries is useful. And your secondaries are your big ticket attacks that not only they cost a lot of stamina and they do a lot of things, and a good portion of what they do is based on responding to changes in the combat terrain. Essentially, somebody has a state put on them, someone has provoked opportunity, someone is now flat-footed, suddenly your attack lights up, or you remember, when I see this symbol on that person's bar while I'm just looking directly ahead, I know button number 4 takes advantage of that.
I see.
And if you were not taking advantage of that, you were wasting a substantial portion of the stamina on the attack, because that was all bound up in the ability to do this extra thing. So if you're just jamming 4 as often as it's available, you are going to blow through your stamina for less efficiency than you could doing something else.
And going back to just a moment, you talked about when something becomes available. All of these attacks, and a lot of other things as well, have a cooldown, which means that when you use them, it takes a certain amount of time before they're able to be used again. And it sounds like our first 3 primary attacks have very short cooldowns, so they can be repeated if you want to quite a bit. But the secondary, which may have the more drastic effects, take longer for them to recharge in a sense.
Right, so I'm hedging on that because we just had a discussion in the office as to whether we need cooldowns at all with the stamina costs and such, whether cooldowns are having their intended effect. So I cannot promise those will have cooldowns the next time you see a build.
Perfect. Future things are coming, yes.
So alpha has been very, very useful at this point because we're getting a lot of feedback from players, and some of it is, yeah, we know there's a huge queue for my programmer to get all this in. Hopefully, when that gets in, it'll be great, and your concern will be addressed. But a lot of it is also like, I didn't think you guys would do that. All right, so everybody's got a long
now what? Huh? Now what do we do?
So let's see if we can maybe push you back towards where we think it's actually more fun to play, rather than just everybody has a staff or a longbow and runs around in circles with goblins chasing them all the time. Just pull an example out of the air.
Yeah, like maybe Nehemiah. So yeah, something like that. But we talked.
Mad you mispronounced his name.
I know Nehemiah. Yes, I know. I apologize to him repeatedly, but then I'll probably do it again.
I've had to become the guy around the office that corrects people. He was so distraught when he was here for PaizoCon and nobody was getting his name right.
Well, we'll try and correct that for him. We talked about. Let me rephrase. I believe that when your character starts out, you're going to get some modicum amount of basic weaponry, correct?
Yes. So right now you get a sort of starter package that gives you a little bit towards one of the 4 roles: fighter, wizard, rogue, or cleric. Our long-term solution, probably as soon as we start early enrollment, is you wake up, you have just died, you are not dead anymore. Here's a little bit of the background as to why we think that is. Have a club, go whack some goblins. look, a goblin dropped a longsword. That's great. Maybe you should learn to use a longsword if you like that. And so we don't want to give you an overwhelming number of options at the very beginning. We want to just start you off with the basic nugget of here is a simple weapon. Go hit people over the head with it until you get a feel for the system and decide how you'd want to specialize your character.
I got that. You talked about, certainly crafting is going to be a big part in PFO, and I don't want to sort of diverge into that right now, but, you talked about possibility of buying weapons, craft-made or whatever. It sounds as if that's not going to be something really functional right at the first of EE. Is that correct? Right now?
We are desperately trying to get a market in as soon as humanly possible. Or
Got it.
I don't know if Mark actually qualifies as human. He is such a genius programmer, so as soon as markedly possible. But yes, no, we have programmers slaving away at trying to get a market in because we understand that is very, very essential to be able to buy and sell.
So until then, if you're in a settlement and you've got some friends who are making things, you might be able to trade them. They can give them to you maybe for an IOU or something. So
right, exactly. Right. And there is coin in the game. It is an item that falls into your crafting resources because we haven't actually done all the bells and whistles on that either. But if you want to start trading coin for things, you could do that as well.
Well, as long as we're not waiting for Santa to give us coal in our stocking, so we have more things to spend. Because apparently,
so
coal.
Everybody wants coal.
Yes.
Yeah. So. Segueing to crafting, just Lee and I did a more so we had a value for various things that were like, so coal should be worth this amount, and so I made all the things that use coal, and the more coal I add, the more expensive it gets to make based on this arbitrary value. But then I used it a lot because it's used in steel, which is used in basically everything. So last week, Lee and I sat down and actually came up with an approximation of how often do we actually expect a player to go through one of these things? Can we come up with a more actual ratio of how much of this stuff should be used, and there is a lot more coal that is needed than we thought there would be. So
yes.
Next build, there should be significantly more coal entering the economy.
I'm sure people will be very happy about that.
Right. And also, so there was a week of discussion of this loudly in the office, and our combat programmer and UI programmer, Cole Brown, was constantly getting confused and annoyed at us shouting about getting more coal into the game, and is there enough coal? And he's like, what do you want?
Like shoveling into that engine. More coal, more speed. Yeah. So, we talk about basic weapons, but I know that there's a functionality in the game about keywords, where if you want to have a more efficient, a shinier, or more effective weapon, you're going to have things with keywords in them. Can you explain a little bit about how keywords affect combat, and hopefully we'll segue into keywords in crafting?
Right. So keywords are sort of our matching system, if you will. We don't restrict you from holding any item in the game. It's not like this is a level 10 item, you can't use this until you're level 10. Somebody can hand you a level 10 sword, and you could use it. It's just, it would have a lot of keywords on it that you don't know how to use yet. And so basically keywords is an enormous matching system. You have an attack or a passive feat, depending on armor or weapon or utilities or what have you. There's lots of things you use keywords. Every time we get a bright idea, we add keywords to more things rather than just having flat numbers, because keywords are very exciting. But for the simplest nugget of weapons, your attack, as you level up each attack, it will get additional keywords. So your longsword attack starts off just with the slashing keyword. And then at level 2, it gets the sharp keyword. And at level 3, it gets the balanced keyword. And at level 4, it gets the masterwork keyword, because that's your tier 2 level. At level 5, you finally pick up your last basic keyword, which is the razored keyword. And at level 6, it picks up the vorpal keyword. And so that is as you're leveling up each individual attack. So if you have like a level 2 attack and a level 3 attack, one of them has one more keyword than the other one.
So comparing them to tabletop, where they're used to like a +1 sword versus a +2 sword, we're actually replacing keywords for pluses in a sense, aren't we?
Yes, so in a lot of ways we were trying to make the game feel familiar, but we are potentially doing it in ways that might be confusing. And so if you get a +3 sword, that means it has 3 more keywords than a basic version of the sword.
Okay. Got it. Very cool.
Right. So we have appropriated some terms and reapplied them as MMOs tend to do. I promise we were not reapplying the tabletop terms nearly as much as, say, the World of Darkness MMO was. If you have seen some of the leaked documents about that, we're like, really? That's okay. So we're at least trying to keep it in the same realm of what this term means in tabletop, but we don't have the same systems in a lot of ways, so using a term because it's familiar might make it slightly more confusing, and we apologize for that in advance.
Yeah, you want to keep it hand grenade range, not RPG range, yeah. So,
but a +3 sword is better than a +0 sword, so
absolutely.
you know that from tabletop.
Absolutely.
So you've got this +3 sword, and if your attack is just the basic version of the attack, all long swords are slashing. There's nothing you can do to not make it a slashing weapon. That's the basic keyword it gets no matter what. It's a longsword. But if it is a +3 longsword, it actually has 3 more of those basic keywords. It is picked up, sharp, balanced, and razored. It doesn't have masterwork yet because it's not a tier 2 weapon. But so this longsword has 4 keywords. Good for you. If you're using the level 1 version of the attack, it's no better for you than a +0 longsword.
I got
because the +0 longsword also has slashing, and that's all your attack can activate.
I see.
But by the time you start leveling up your attack, suddenly it's like, my +0 longsword isn't cutting it anymore because I've got a level 3 attack and a +0 longsword. I'm still using my attack as if it was a level 1 attack.
So you'll still have to get a +3 longsword to match your skill levels, so to speak.
Right. So essentially, keywords in a lot of ways are a lowest common denominator between your character's capability and your gear.
Okay.
If you're using noob gear, you are going to be very similar to a noob. And if you are using high-end veteran gear, but you are a noob, you're still going to be a noob. And so you've kind of got to balance your character experience expenditures with your gear upgrades. You can go higher in one or the other, and you'll just take the baseline between them.
Well, we've talked about the attacking. What about the defending? What about the armor proficiencies, and how are we going to actually keep from getting our heads cut off? Right.
So armor is, again, a keyword-based system. And you buy an armor efficiency, which I don't know if that keeps you from equipping it. I don't think it's supposed to, but the armor efficiency is, like with attacks, required to unlock the abilities that actually let you use your armor. Right. Proficiencies, in a lot of ways, are just a gate on getting these other things. And that becomes important. Tier 1 proficiencies are kind of, it feels weird, like I buy this thing for 5 XP to buy all these other things for 5 XP. But it starts to become valuable when you get to Tier 2, and suddenly you can't buy the Tier 2 attacks or feats or whatever until you have the right proficiency at Tier 2, which will have a number of prerequisites. So there are a number of ways that you can try to focus as quickly and ramp up as quickly as possible, but between achievements and ability scores and prerequisites, we are going to you can't really get to Tier 2 stuff until you have a bunch of stuff that is ready to go to Tier 2. You can't just go, I'm going to shoot to Tier 3 in my attacks even though I'm still a noob in defense.
So basically you're going to make sure we have a solid base before we move forward.
Right. So an artifact of that is Tier 1 proficiencies feel like they don't do much. Tier 2 weapon proficiencies will start, and armor proficiencies will feel like they do more because they're the gate to buying Tier 2 stuff. But so essentially, you'll buy this proficiency, and now you have access to armor feats, which are specific to your role. And right now, each role has 3. They could have more at a future date. 3 was just the minimum amount of variety we wanted to have. And so for fighters, these are essentially, they're based on the archetypes for the role. Loosely based in some cases, based on what our technology can do. Like, for example, the fighter has Dragoon, which in tabletop is a mounted fighter. And, one day when we get mounts in, Dragoon will probably get some cool mounted abilities, but for now it's the two-handed weapon fighter type of build. So these armor feats sort of specialize you for your role a little bit. So the fighter has the Unbreakable, which is the sword and board version, the Dragoon, which is a two-handed fighter, and the Archer, which is the ranged fighter. And in addition to giving you a small number of special abilities you get all the time just for slotting the feet, even if you were completely naked, which improve you in that role, they also give you a selection of keywords that match the kind of armor that is best for that particular build. So, for example, the Unbreakable fighter gets keywords that are going to be prevalent on heavy armors like pot steel plate and later better versions plate mail and banded mail, whereas the Archer gets keywords that are more appropriate for medium armors because the Archer is supposed to be a little bit more mobile.
Like cloth or leather armor, that sort of things. Yeah.
So the medium leathers or the chainmail or whatever, the fighter never really wants to wear cloth, except in some very weird corner case situations where you want to be super immune to fire, for example. But so essentially, you're going to equip this armor, and the armor, like a weapon, has a ton of keywords on it or hardly any keywords on it. And as your armor feat levels up, it looks for more of those keywords, and as it matches keywords, so let me step back and tell you what matching keywords actually does.
Go ahead.
So for attacks, matching keywords gives you additional damage. It's worth basically 5 points of base damage, which is a 40 to 100 point scale in most cases. So each keyword you get, basically, your first keyword you get will increase your damage by 5 out of 40. So that's what, 12%? 12.5%?
Yep, something like that.
Yeah, 15%.
It's a number. We're not talking. It's a number. We're not talking numbers now.
My head. All right, but essentially, the more keywords you get, the higher your damage goes. By the time you get tier 2, you've basically doubled your damage. 25%, probably.
Hey,
I'll add it up
we can leave numbers for a later day. Numbers are fine. Okay, later days.
It's got to be 12.5%. I'm saying this because Night Drifter's going to watch this, and he's going to be like, "You didn't know this off the top of your head?" Even though we're not supposed to talk about numbers, he's going to know. Anyway, so the more keywords you get, the more damage it does, and we have an additional feature called, we're currently calling it Effect Power. It's basically the effects on your attack, like I apply this many stacks of bleed, I stun you, whatever. Since they don't really interface with damage directly, the more keywords you have, also the better those get relative to your target. So if you're fighting somebody in worse armor than you are, than your weapon is, if your weapon is better than their armor, your effects will last longer, and if their armor is better than your weapon, then your effects will be reduced in power because those are not directly damage related. Sort
of like the slowing effect that the archers have that people can have in alpha, saying, "Why don't we have that?" Yeah. So what?
Because monsters will just hold still and let you wail on them.
Of course.
And there are a number of slowing attacks. I don't know why people haven't found them yet.
As my brain is cheese, I have to look at my notes again.
So moving back to armor.
Okay.
So what keywords do with that is keywords improve your resistance to damage on armor. And additionally, there is this set of keyword effects that every armor has that basically give you more hit points and more defenses and more recovery the more keywords you're matching on your armor. So even if you're a 20th level fighter, if you're not wearing any armor, then your hit points are going to be very low. You've bought a bunch of permanent hit points, but you can't get your hit points to where they're supposed to be until you've worn better armor.
Because the armor keywords actually make that total larger effectively.
Yeah, and so this is... A lot of this is to address some problems in other PvP games where essentially everybody is afraid to lose stuff, and so everybody is naked, and we want you to be much more effective than the players that have decided, screw it, I'm not going to lose anything, I'm going to be naked, if you are actually wearing the appropriate gear.
Yeah, this is not Rust, yes.
Right.
So the thing that I would like to talk about before we move directly into crafting about weapons is there's this durability issue. I mean, after you die, there's certain damages that affect your items and they reduce the functionality. Can you talk a bit about that and how is that how maybe crafting helps improve that or some way?
Right. So we are a full loot PvP game with an asterisk. So most of your gear that you're carrying around with you, when you die, 25% of it is just destroyed off the top, and the rest of it stays on your body. If you can get back to your body before somebody takes it, then you can get it. In a lot of cases, if you died in PvP, probably your killer is going to take it. There's a lot of controls in for that. Like if you're in a group, your friends can stop you from looting your body by hitting the people. So you basically, the one team has to win and then loot everybody. Type of thing. But we didn't want you to constantly be respawning with nothing, particularly in the wilderness. And so we have this idea of threading, where you can pick a certain amount of your gear that you have equipped that is threaded with threads of fate or threads of pharasma or whatever. It is bound to you, so even death cannot sunder you from your cherished belongings.
Soul glue, so to speak.
And so it never gets left on your corpse, and when you respawn, you are still wearing it.
Got it.
And in that, but because of that, we were very worried that things like armor and weapons would never leave the economy because they would always be threaded and you would always respawn with them.
Yeah.
So that's where item decay comes into it, in that every time you respawn, they will be damaged to a certain extent. So swords and armor will probably last longer than a potion or a miscellaneous piece of gear because people will thread them all the time, but eventually they will go away the number of times you die. And we're still zeroing in on how many times you can die, but we want to make it fair. I don't even remember what we decided on this week for our approximations of how often people should replace gear. But essentially, a lot of things will be completely disposable. You will fly what you can afford to lose with those. You will go, man, I don't think I'm going to die. I'm going to take the risk that I should wear all this stuff that I can't thread. If I do die, it's probably lost to me unless I can get back to my body. I always need my sword and my armor, so I'm going to thread that. And so even when I die, it's going to be damaged a little bit, but I'll still have it.
Now, is there going to be a way to repair those?
Yes. system to be inserted at some point in the future, probably after we have an actual item damage system. The idea behind it is that we want to make sure crafters are still included. So it's not just going to be like you walk up to an NPC and give him 5 gold and suddenly all your stuff is repaired. If the guy made the suit of armor and people are just going to repair it indefinitely, we want the kind of guy that made it to be the one who has to be involved in the process of repairing it. So
That's
if you're an
very good.
armorsmith, you're going to have continued business.
Very cool.
It's not just be like, I made the suit of armor once and then just people repaired it indefinitely, completely out of my control, and I made no more money off of it. And probably the way the system is going to work out, it seems very likely that a lot of people will just, this is damaged about halfway, I'm going to just throw it on the auction house, see if I can recoup some of my investment for it, and I'm going to buy a new suit. And then probably crafters that can repair it will grab a whole bunch of suits, pull it off the auction house, and repair them and relist them for a profit. That kind of thing. It probably won't be walking to your friend the armorsmith saying, fix this a lot of the time, because just the economy works better. That's why we have a market, is so you don't have to directly walk up to people. But some people might do that as well.
So a second-hand armor store may be quite viable, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it may be a quite valuable market as a crafter to go, like, this guy is selling this just because he almost trashed it and he just wants to get rid of it for some kind of bargain, but actually the amount he's selling for it is less than the value it is to me in crafting materials. So I can repair this to an awesome suit of armor more cheaply than I could make this suit of armor just from raw materials.
Very cool.
And so there'll be a lot of fun in that for the crafters, hopefully.
Oh, that'll be great. I mean, looking forward to that. Let's go ahead and move into actual crafting for a moment. Get focused more on that. Could you go over for us what are the sort of different stages of crafting, and what are we going to have to do to become proficient at each of those stages, or can we become proficient at all the stages?
So, we're not expecting an individual player to do so. We have 2 distinct roles that are based on the NPC classes from tabletop: the expert and the commoner. The commoner specializes in professions and gathering, which include gathering and refining skills, and the expert specializes in craft skills. So there are 3 stages to crafting. There is the gathering materials, there is the refining materials, and there is the using materials. And all these are different stages of the process that use different skills. Mm-hmm. So you go out in the wilderness and you find nodes, and eventually we'll have harvest nodes that spawn a ton of materials, but right now we have the more limited nodes that just, you see one, you get a few pieces, you move on.
Since there's no outpost right now, there's no use having big harvesting nodes.
Right, well, outposts, actually, there's been some, I think, misunderstandings about outposts are for settlement level goods. They're for the bulk goods. Outposts will probably not actually produce a lot of crafting system goods. The outposts will be primarily for, we need a ton of food and lumber for building our city. Instead, we have this concept of what we sort of refer to as gushers, which are technically the harvest nodes, which at some point you'll get to this, like, I'm just hidden on a mining node. Oh, by the way, there's actually a huge mother lode under here. You should bring a kit and put it down and mine a ton of stuff, but monsters will start attacking you while you're doing that, so you'll need a lot of people. And this is some way in the future, because that's a lot of tech on that, but that's how a lot of mass numbers of, like, all your coal, when you need hundreds and hundreds of pieces of coal to make what you go through in a day, that's how you'll ultimately get it. For the meantime, we're upping the numbers on the smaller nodes to make sure a reasonable number is coming in. Since we don't have item resurrection right now, then that should balance out.
I could really look forward to the graphic of a gusher of coal.
It's just Texas tea.
Yes. Exactly. So you've got gathering.
Yeah, so you've got gathering, and so you can either get it from nodes, or also when you kill monsters, a lot of them will drop salvage components, which are basically also raw materials.
Yeah.
Our ratio is something like we expect 80% to come in from actual nodes and 20% to come in from monsters. Numbers to be tweaked later, because there's no way we can actually control that, short of just lowering it in one place and raising it in another. But our goal is we don't want just killing monsters to be the main way that components enter the economy, because we want people that specialize in gathering skills to have a real valid use in the economy. So you'll want to protect your friends while they're going out and they're gathering nodes to get stuff.
So once you've got all the stuff gathered and you have to refine it, how do you actually go about that?
Right. So you slub your stuff back to town, and the major quality level of raw materials is that the more tapped out a hex gets, the heavier the components get in that hex. Like one piece of steel, one piece of coal is still one piece of coal. It's just it gets twice as heavy after the hex is starting to get tapped out, so you're going to be able to carry half as much of it back to town, essentially.
So instead of actually dropping the amount of available, you're going to make it heavier so you can't carry as much.
I mean, eventually you will totally use it up, but as it gets lower, the quality drops, and the quality is not, I'm going to need more coal to make stuff, it's just, I'm still going to need 3 pieces of coal, it's just now these 3 pieces of coal are very, very heavy. And so I can carry fewer of them back to town with any reasonable travel method.
Well, speaking of quality, that goes back to the keyword thing. I assume that you've got quality or effectively keywords on your raw materials just like you have on the finished products, right?
Nope. The raw material is just it has a stock. It has potentially 2 stocks. These are not actually keywords, but for example, there are 2 different chemical, like antiseptic and aromatic. Like what particular herb might have both of those, so you can use it to make an antiseptic extract or an aromatic extract, which you use in alchemy.
But if you're going to make the higher tier items, is there higher quality base materials you need for that?
Right. No, this is where we get to refining. So you build this all home, and you go, I have a refining recipe for this thing. I automatically get the +0 version of this when I get the skill. So I am a smelter. I want to make a steel ingot. I need coal and I need iron ore. Awesome! I made a steel ingot. It is a +0 steel ingot. I'm going to have to find the recipes for +1, +2, and +3 steel ingots, and those let me make the higher plus versions of these ingots. Let me say these ingots about 5 more times, so it's completely redundant. And each upgrade consumes more materials. Essentially, you're throwing away the less good pieces of what you found, and you're making the same number of ingots, but they're better, and you use way more materials because you're like, this is steel like a baby would use. I'm going to make the best steel that I can possibly make with this stuff.
Yeah, chrome steel. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so, and as you level up your refining skills, you'll be able to make tier 2 ingots, which, so one of our goals, which is to never make tier 1 materials completely obsolete. So tier 2 steel ingots, the dwarven steel ingots, will need lodestone, which historically it actually turns out a lot of stuff in modern stainless and chromium steels is present in lodestone, so that's why you're using that. Is you're basically making an alloy, and you don't necessarily know why you're doing it, just because you learned from the dwarves that that's how they make these awesome steel alloys. But that also needs a bunch of regular iron ore and a bunch of regular coal in addition to these new higher tier materials. So all the way up, even in tier 3 materials are going to probably use a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 stuff, just to keep that valuable to the economy all the way through.
So that lodestone, is that what you get from those meteor hexes?
Lodestone, I think a lot of it will be in meteor hexes. It's a tier 2 material, so it'll also be in non-tier 3 hexes. So you could just find that in regular places. It's adamantine, which is a sky metal, which you'll need to go to the monster hexes for. But yeah, so
you've got it refined. You've got it refined at certain levels.
You now said that you have a steel ingot +3, and right now, everybody is trying to be soup to nuts, and so they knew they needed steel ingot +3 because they wanted that for the longsword +3 that they were going to make. But once we have a market, we're expecting a lot more people to be like, well, I'm just an awesome refiner. I refine stuff, I throw it up on the market, I make a profit, I go refine more stuff, go me. So essentially, when you're making a longsword, you'll probably just go see what the best deal is you can get off the market for +3 ingots. And then you go into the refining step, or into the crafting step. The refining step also, as your skill improves, has a chance to churn out slightly higher pluses. So if you make a +3 and your skill is really good, you might actually get a +4 or +5 on some of the things that you make. And so that's how the highest plussed materials enter the game.
More randomly than by recipe. Yeah.
But refiners we expect to be much more bulk producers. Right now it's sort of weird that you're going, I only need three iron ingots for this thing, steel ingots for this thing, let me just make those 3. Refiners in the long term will probably be, let me produce as many of these as I possibly can because I make 5 gold on each one I make at the current profit margin, so I'm just going to churn these babies out.
You might even have a whole company of refiners who focus on that for their skills, And
so for them it's going to be like, I was going to make 1,000 ingots at +3 today anyway, and I planned for 1,000 at +3, and randomly I got about 100 at a higher plus, and that was awesome. And so that's pure profit for selling those. Or maybe your razor thin margin and you were really counting on 100 and you only got 50, and so suddenly you're bankrupt and you should have planned better. This is the economy of refiners in Pathfinder Online. So you go to make your sword, which you are probably going to be in the long term a different person from the one that made the ingots.
Yeah.
And your sword recipe is you're going to need X many steel ingots, and you're going to need some leather straps for the handle. And the better materials you use, the higher plus the sword becomes, which gives it more keywords.
And I'm assuming that if you have the same quality in all the materials, you have a better chance of getting one that's actually that quality. If you have some maybe that's lower or higher,
+3 across the board for all the materials required, this will certainly be a +3 sword. But as your skill increases as a crafter, you get a little wiggle room. So technically, if you need enough materials for this, you could maybe slip in a +2, and it would still be +3. So, and that's what there's a little bar that shows you like you're wasting this many materials because you could use a worse material and it would still be this good. And so that's what higher skill does for crafters. You're never going to get a skill high enough that you can automatically go up a plus, but you're going to get high enough that you can go, maybe I can skimp on some of these materials and still have it be what I want it to be. And so that's the efficiency of crafting, is that you can make a batch of stuff and go, actually, I know I'm making 20 longswords today, I want them to be +3. I know with my skill I can throw in this many +2 or even +1 things and still get what I want out of this for the maximum efficiency, which is, that is the economy of the crafter, is going, what is the cheapest way and the most efficient way that I can make these swords for sale.
And that's something I'm sure every character who wants to do that is going to have to learn as they go along. It's they'll find nuances as they go.
Right. And so bringing all this back to what is a new player going to do, once we have a new market, a new player is going to go to the market and buy a sword. And and we're going to teach you a little bit about crafting, and buying low-level crafting skills is a good way to get your ability scores up, so maybe you'll dabble in it and go, hey, I like crafting, this is great. And maybe I'll craft a little bit more, but really, you're buying a long sword at the best possible price because there are a bunch of people that have run it through the entire production chain and want to get your business.
Yes.
And crafters, unlike a lot of games, craft skills are not another independent area of your character sheet that goes up. Like in most MMOs, why wouldn't I raise my craft skills? It doesn't hold me back in any way. I want the crafting achievements. I want to get the skill up. I want I get sad when the numbers are low, and I get happy when the numbers are high. And therefore, why wouldn't I pick up my 2 limited craft skills and take them as high as I can go? For us, buying craft skills is XP you could have spent on combat skills. It is XP you could have spent on settlement management skills. It's XP you could have spent on something you would rather be doing if you don't actually like crafting. And that's the way we want to keep it, is we want people that want to do crafting to do crafting. And so this is part also of the way we set up the achievements to raise your crafting skill. You could make a +0 item and get an achievement for it, and then make a +1 item and get an achievement for it, make a +2 item and get an achievement for it, but we're not going to require you to do it in that order. If you want to just go, screw it, I am making a +5 item, that is what I'm doing today, I'm getting the materials to make my masterwork. Also, I made that item, I got every achievement beneath that, I am awesome swordsmith, look at all these achievements I just got. We do not want to make leveling up crafting to be a grind as much as possible, because we want you to do crafting because you want to be participating in the market and making these things for a profit. One of the dominant problems I feel for a lot of economies in MMOs is that the raw materials are worth way more than the finished product because the skill points have been extracted from them. Yes. Already. You throw the thing up on the market for pennies because you might as well see if you can get some kind of return on your investment, but actually you were satisfied with the skill points you got out of running it through the crafting process. So the market is totally tanked. Like, you're like, I would love to sell my sword that I made because I'm a crafter, I make swords, and I can't sell it for anything. It is totally a losing position to try to sell this on the market because people are just throwing it up as a loss leader for their skill points. And
that's certainly something that the PFO has been very adamant about. They want the economy to be a valid and viable part of this game. Mm-hmm. Very cool. I know Ryan has said he was going to be making a list for a future blog about the things that they've been working on that may not make it into EE at the first day or so if they've been working on alpha. Do you think that there'll be a lot of we know it, well, let me rephrase. It sounds like from what you're saying that having a marketplace where one can actually do a monetary exchange for equipment may not be something day one of EE.
We were really hoping. We make pouty faces at Mark every day. Market. We were being as alternately adorable to the programmers as possible, or as mean to the programmers as possible. We're trying to see which one works to get us stuff faster. The design department would love to have everything we want in the game immediately, as soon as possible. Who knows what they will do? They have to strangely they have to sleep sometimes, and none of them have multiple man powers, so there can be like 5 of them working on the same thing rather than just the one of them. I think within the next few weeks, we will probably start to get a handle on what is realistic for by the time alpha is done. We have a list of things that, yo guys, we should really get these in. Please, can we get these in? They're super essential. And so far, people seem to think that's reasonable, so hopefully Brian will be able to put together that list. And on the side of this is definitely going to be in by E is stuff like the market, but I don't know for sure at this juncture.
Well, it sounds like Minions is another thing that's not going to be there for E. So do you think crafting is going to have a lot of items on that list?
Crafting is humongous. The thing with everything for crafting is in. Because crafting is a spreadsheet, and I put stuff in there, and Art may yell at me because they did not make a model for that thing, but you can totally make it.
Yes. So
I think
mysterious block.
Placeholders for all the armor, so you don't have a question mark that you put on, and this is totally tier 2 armor, but now I'm just naked. But but the stats say I'm in tier 2 armor, and the stats are working, so my job is done. It's just. I have now blackmailed Art into putting something in there because it's in the game, guys. I guess it needs art.
You just don't want them to look like the Riddler with a big question mark on them.
Right.
So what I really appreciate the time you've given us today. It's a lot of good information, especially for hopefully people who have not been following PFO as closely as some of us have. Is there anything you'd like to talk to us about today that we haven't touched on that you feel strongly about getting out there for information?
I don't think so.
Cool.
We're rebalancing stuff based on alpha, like I mentioned at the beginning. So expect changes before this is done, based on partially on your feedback and viewers like you.
So, who would you like to see be our next Gobbocast victim interviewee here?
It's Bob's turn, right? We have to make Bob come in here and tell you about escalations.
I'd be happy to have Bob. I mean, I'll talk to Bonnie about that. But one of the things that we're very, very pleased about with the Gobbocast is that Goblinworks has really gone off backwards to give us a chance to get this information to the public, and we really appreciate that greatly.
I mean, it's been very interesting to work at this company versus prior companies where everything is very hush-hush and you can't tell anybody anything. It's like Ryan's like, no, tell him. Just tell him. Just tell him. We don't have any secrets. Why don't you just tell him? Like, I don't know if it's ready to tell him. Just tell him. Ryan, why are you taking a picture of my whiteboard?
Well, actually, that's, when I see one, that's eventually we'd like to get you to turn the camera and you go up the board and sort of work on things, like a spreadsheet or something, but who knows?
Yeah, so the way Bonnie has set up this room, I'm not sure that is possible. So we have this window, which you cannot see, which is in front of me right now. So I think turning the computer so you could actually see the whiteboard would mean there would be tremendous glare on everything in most cases when we're using the computer. And also the TV that we're not using anymore for Skype is bolted to the wall, and I don't think she wanted to deal with that. So there are a number of logistical difficulties in letting you see the whiteboard right now.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but I can always also, at the moment, see the window and the back of your head because I'm reflected off the glass behind you.
Well, it's a very nice back of the head. Like, you'll see my
absolutely.
The barber always asks me if I want it to be square or rounded. I don't know. I don't see the back of my head. So I'm glad somebody can take advantage of however she cut my hair last week.
This sounds good to me. Stephen, again, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Again, we are very, very grateful here at Gobblecast for the time given to us by Goblinworks of their developers and designers. We really appreciate Stephen being on today. We have just received word from Bonnie Paz that Bob Settles, who is the PvE designer for Goblinworks, will be our next interview set on the 20th of August. We're looking forward to having him, and we're looking forward to continuing giving the Gobblecast community and the PFO community as much information as we can whenever we can. And for that, I will say, Anon.